No.
If you won't
Use the GameCube controller.
then you must die.
Now hold on. Let me clarify. Do you own a GameCube and need a few more controllers for it? Maybe. Do you not own a GameCube, but own a GameCube adapter and want to use a few controllers with it? Maybe. Do you not own an adapter, but you already have one or two GameCube controllers? Yes, go ahead and buy an adapter. Should you buy a few more controllers alongside that adapter? Maybe. Are you someone who plays Smash Brothers, but you don't own a GameCube, you don't own a GameCube adapter, and you don't own any GameCube controllers already? Should you go out of your way to buy a GameCube controller? Absolutely not. And in order to explain why I say that, let's first take a look at the GameCube controller. Here it is, the GameCube controller. Now, if you saw my last video, you'd know that this controller and another one I showed off were the two controllers I had since I was a kid. So that would make this thing about 22 years old. 22 years, and it still works just as good as it did the day I got it, which is very impressive, especially when you consider how often you find old busted controllers. So here's two GameCube controllers that were just given to me. One was from a friend. He didn't use it anymore, so he gave it to me. And another was from my brother. He bought it at, I think it was like a Salvation Army kind of store. Some sort of store where people get rid of their old stuff. Now, here's the thing. These sticks were swapped. So this orange one was the one that had the missing cover. Why in the world did I switch the sticks on these two controllers? That is why. The stick box inside of this controller is busted. It wiggles. It just moves on its own. And this is the most common issue you'll find with old GameCube controllers, is that this stick over here has been used and abused so much that it just doesn't stick in place anymore. Okay, well, you could fix that though. I mean, how would you go about fixing that? Well, first off, you'd need a tri-wing screwdriver to take it apart. And then you would need a desoldering tool to desolder the stick box off, and a soldering tool to solder the new stick box on. Now, what kind of stick box would you use? Well, if it's an older controller, you could use a T1 or a T2 stick box. Both of those will work. But if this is a later controller, it might be using a T3 stick box. And you can only replace a T3 with a T3. Now, where can I get T1s, T2s, and T3s? Well, you could take them from other GameCube controllers. Maybe you don't use the C stick on here, so you could just swap them. Or you could buy a Wii Nunchuck controller. The older ones had T1 and T2 stick boxes, and the later ones had T3 stick boxes. You won't know until you open it up. By the way, I do hope that your tri-wing screwdriver is long and thin enough for these holes, because mine was apparently not. So I can't actually take this apart. Now, I know that sounds like a lot. And here's the thing. If you are someone who enjoys taking apart stuff, you probably already have all those tools. And if you do, go right ahead and buy an old GameCube controller. You probably already know how to fix it. But if you're the average consumer, first off, you gotta buy the controller, buy the tri-wing screwdriver, buy a soldering tool and a desoldering tool and an extra stick box. You end up having to buy all this stuff. And the average consumer probably doesn't want to do that. So if you're the average consumer, you're probably going to want to buy a good condition controller. A good condition GameCube controller is just as expensive as any modern game controller. But is it really fair to compare such an old controller to a modern one based on the price alone? I mean, maybe if they're selling for around the same price, it must be as good as everyone says it is. I mean, I hear people all the time talking about how great this controller is. In fact, maybe we should look at what made this controller so good. It did not look like a Bionicle's foot. Yeah, so the last system Nintendo made before this one had a very weird looking controller. You kind of didn't know where to put your hands, but this one modernized it. 2 handles. It's very obvious. You put one hand here, one hand here. You don't need a third one, and everything is in a comfortable position. You know what? I think I get it now. I think I understand why everyone loves this controller. It just feels good, and that's the thing I always hear people say. The GameCube controller feels good. And you know what? They're right. It does feel good. I think I get it now. I understand how this controller revolutionized gaming. It set the standard for controllers going forward. I mean, look. Here's a PS5 DualSense controller. 2 handles, comfortable position. Not exactly the same shape, but pretty similar. And look at this. Even the features are all here. 2 sticks on this controller, 2 sticks on this controller. A D-pad here, a D-pad here. 4 buttons. Sure, they're in different places, but you know what? That's okay. We still have the 4 buttons, and look at this. This is the most important thing the GameCube did. Analog triggers. Modern controllers, what do they have? Analog triggers. The GameCube gave us that. That's fantastic. And look at this, 2 shoulder buttons. I mean, we only had just 2 buttons for Super Nintendo controllers, but this brought us 4 things: 2 controllers and 2 shoulder buttons. Wait a minute here. Wait a minute here. Wait a minute here. I thought this set the standard going forward. That's what people were saying. No. You know what? Maybe that's just something someone else added on later, right? I mean, it still has something else. I mean, look. Let's look at this controller, okay? So you look at a Super Nintendo controller, and you have start and select on the front. And for a while, controllers had start and select. And while we still have those buttons, they're now lines and lines. I mean, what in the world? Hand this controller to your friend and say, "Oh, you should put the lines button." Which one? Let's look at the Xbox controller, okay? This is the Xbox Series controller. And it's got lines and boxes instead of start and select. I mean, sure, you could say, press the lines buttons or press the boxes buttons, but like, you hear that the first time and it's like, what in the world? Why couldn't it be start and select? And you know what? Let's look at Nintendo. Nintendo does plus and minus. Okay, that's easy. Tell your friend, press the plus button, press the minus button. But I mean, start and select were perfectly fine. Why'd you change them to plus and minus? You know what? Looking at these modern controllers, they can really learn something from the GameCube. I mean, the GameCube still has start and select. Wait a minute here. Where'd the select button go? Did it leave with the Nintendo 64? Wait, I don't think that controller had the select button either. But the Super Nintendo had start and select. Why did they get rid of the select button? Hold on, they didn't go forward. They went backwards. No. That can't be right. You know what? The select button came back, so that's good. I mean, we still have the buttons and the triggers and the sticks and the stick clicking. Wait a minute. Why don't the sticks click in? All the modern controllers have sticks that click in. Why doesn't it? I thought people said this set the standard going forward. Wait a minute. Something's not right here. Now that I look at these two controllers, something is definitely not right here. It can't be just me. I mean, I thought modern controllers were inspired by what Nintendo did back then. Hold on. Wait a minute here. You know what? This doesn't look like a GameCube controller. This looks like a PS2 controller. And the PS2 came out a year before the GameCube controller? What did the PS2 controller have? Sticks that clicked in? An extra shoulder button? Wait a minute. Are modern controllers just based on all the buttons the PS2 had? The PS2 had all these buttons and came out a year before? No. You know what? There must be something this controller did. I mean, look, analog triggers. What other controller had analog triggers? Well, let's see here. The Xbox had analog triggers, and it didn't come out till a few days before the GameCube? Xbox came out a few days before and already had analog triggers? That can't be right. This controller was supposed to set the standard going forward. I mean, look, this even has ABXY. I mean, look at a modern Nintendo controller. ABX. What in the world? Wait a minute. Why are A, B, and X and Y all in different places? Hold on. The Super Nintendo had ABXY like that. Wait a minute. They didn't base this off the GameCube, but they also didn't base it off the Super Nintendo. What other controller had ABXY in these places? Oh, what? The Dreamcast had ABXY here? What else did the Dreamcast have? Analog triggers? And it came out when? 98? Wait a minute. This didn't give us analog triggers. This came out in 2001? And there was already a system back then that had analog triggers? Hold on a second here. I could have sworn people were saying this set the standard going forward, but like, we already had a Dreamcast in 98 with analog triggers and a PS2 controller with stick clicks and an extra button up here. Hold on. You know what? I'm looking at this wrong. I'm looking at the competition. Maybe what people were trying to say is it set the standard for Nintendo going forward. What is this? It's a remote? Do I change the channel? This is the controller they came out with after this? This didn't set the standard. What in the world? Well, you know what? They did come out with this though. And you know what? Yeah, this makes a bit more sense. It's an upgrade. I mean, yeah, it's just a GameCube controller, but now it's got an extra button up here. Sure, it doesn't have the stick clicks, but you know what? These shoulders, they're still analog, right? I mean, what games on the Wii used analog triggers? None of them? Wait, hold on. That can't be right. What about the Wii U? Here's a Wii U Pro controller. I mean, it has all the buttons. Okay, that's good. It has 2 sticks. It has 2 shoulder buttons. The sticks click in. Okay, and it has analog Wait a minute. Why did they stop giving us analog triggers? First they took away the select button, I think back on the Nintendo 64, and now they gave it back to us as, look, it even says start and select on this controller. We got the select button back, But there's no analog triggers? We got select back, but we gave up analog triggers. Here's the. I mean, look at this. Look at this. Okay, so the sticks were in weird places, but it's in the same places as the GameCube. But there's still no analog triggers. What? Wait a minute. Wait a minute. Wait a minute here. Looking at all of these controllers, nothing's based on the GameCube controller. I thought this. Everyone said this thing set the standard going forward. Everyone said this changed gaming. But looking at all these controllers and the ones that came before it, it didn't set anything. This is just a controller. It's a faker. It's a fraud. What's the big idea? You lied to me for all these years. Stop! It wasn't me! You better have a good explanation.
I had nostalgia for me.
You drowned me in lies. Well, you deserve a fitting punishment. So I've made it pretty clear that despite people selling this thing for around the same price as a modern controller, it doesn't have all the features of a modern controller, which, to be fair, it's an older controller, but even at its time, competitors had controllers that had a few more features than this controller did. No left shoulder button, no stick clicks, no select button. You're not going to be able to play Devil May Cry with this thing. But that's not why people seek out this controller. They don't buy it to play all of their games. They buy it for one game in particular, that game being Smash Brothers. I could go on and on about how there are plenty of other controllers that are much better than this one. I mean, look at this thing. It's a wired controller, and they sell these things for like 50 some odd bucks. Do you know how much you could buy any other wired controller for? A lot less than a GameCube. And those controllers have more features than a GameCube controller. Or, if you're willing to spend a little bit more than $50, here's a Switch Pro controller, $70, has gyro. In my honest opinion, I would say this is an overpriced controller. If you were to ask me, I would say go for the 8BitDo Pro 2 controller. It's got a better D-pad than the Switch Pro. It's got all these fancy little features, programmable buttons, custom profiles, and it connects to your Switch, to your PC, to your phone, whatever. And when you connect it to a PC, you have analog triggers, and it's only $50, around the same price as a GameCube controller. But this video is not about whether or not you should buy my favorite controller. This video is about whether or not you should buy the controller favored by a very specific community. Why is this controller so loved by this community, though? I think the answer to that question is because it's a comfortable controller. And I don't mean just in the hands. Yes, this controller has a reputation for being comfortable to hold, but I think it's comfortable in the minds of many people as well. What I mean by that is, this is a controller that they're familiar with. This is a controller that some people have been using since they were a kid. This is a controller that they know very well. They already have the muscle memory for where all these buttons are, despite the locations being pretty weird. It's a controller loved for its history, its personal history. I totally get it though. You use something for long enough and you're comfortable with it. You know the ins and outs of it. Your muscle memory does all the work. It's the same reason a lot of older Halo players who play on PC will say, I just plug a controller into my computer to play Halo. It's because they're older. Halo was only on the Xbox for the longest time. You could only play with a controller. Even though mouse and keyboard is better, it's not what they're comfortable with. Now, there are times where the old thing can be better than the new thing. I mean, I tried out Windows 11 on someone else's computer, and oh my goodness, they switched some of the left click and right click stuff, and they changed a couple other things, and it's like, why would you do that? I'm gonna stick with Windows 10. It's like what a lot of people say, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. But a lot of these are broken. And if you're someone who enjoys repairing these things, knows what they're doing, that's great. You're actually putting a use to these things instead of tossing them in a landfill. If you're someone who doesn't know how to fix these things, but you come across a perfectly good one for like $20 at like a flea market or on eBay or something, yeah, go ahead and buy it, because I'll tell you right now, you're not going to find a first-party GameCube controller for $20. You could find a third-party controller for like 10 or 15 bucks, and in my opinion, those are just as good as this. But I would only recommend that for, you know, someone who already has a GameCube adapter and a couple GameCube controllers, and they're just looking for one or two more. But if you don't have a GameCube adapter or GameCube controllers or a GameCube console, should you go out of your way to buy one of these? Nah. I would just say use what you're comfortable with, and if that's not the GameCube controller, that's perfectly fine. If you are someone who has used a GameCube controller and you love it and you have one that works, sure, you can keep using it. If you're someone who loves a GameCube controller, but you can't find one anymore because yours is broken and all the nice ones are way overpriced, maybe it's time to step out of your comfort zone a little bit. Maybe it's time to try a different controller. Go to a friend's house, try out one of their controllers, or look up the controllers that other people have been recommending online. In fact, I think it's time for me to get out of my comfort zone. For too long, I've been filming my videos inside, and you know what? I think it's time I go outside. I'm gonna go outside for once, and I'm gonna even film a video out there, and it's gonna be great. Oh my goodness, is that the sun? I can't wait to feel it.